Hello there, Internet. Still playing with technology. We'll see how that turns out. Today I want to talk about accepting how you are. Um, Pointedly say accepting not who you are, but how you are. Some of this will be portable, so maybe it'll apply to accepting who you are, but right now I want to talk about how you are, which is sort of the fundamental uh, processes by which your experience is built up often are sort of given to you. You don't have a lot of freedom in determining certain things, and you just have to accept those. And the reason for that is basically when something is down below the level that you can actually affect a real change, then there's no amount of being dissatisfied by it that can make the situation any better. And so, very often, in the practice of being a happy human being, our best move is to not make something worse than it is. So if there's some sort of experience that's going to be unpleasant, okay, how can I avoid compounding that unpleasantness, right, to maximize the sort of degrees of freedom that I have within that experience? I can probably make some changes in how I respond to that experience that can move me on a path towards a more pleasant experience in the future. But if I am stuck in a process of dissatisfaction, those sorts of changes aren't going to happen. So, concrete examples. Right now, it's, I don't actually know, something like 7:30 a.m., right? And if I'm up at 7:30 a.m., that probably means I haven't been sleeping a lot. So one of the things that I deal with in my life is insomnia. I had a whole year and a half when I was getting my math degree where I was basically the narrator out of Fight Club, just rarely slept, don't really remember anything other than the mathematics, which I remember quite well. Had all sorts of interesting social dynamics and whatnot, and that's just the reality of my experience. Sometimes when my brain gets into certain states, sleeping not a great thing, so I tried to go to bed at a reasonable hour last night and then woke up at 3 in the morning and went, oh, okay, it's going to be interesting. So I could be upset that I'm having that experience. It's a persistent experience in my life, and I've definitely had to give up some opportunities in life because I really struggle with having a sleeping schedule that accords with the norms of my society. But that's not going to help me. That's not going to make my today any better to be upset that I didn't get the amount of sleep that I wanted. So instead, all right, fine, lean into it. That just means I get to be up in the morning. I can send some communications sort of early that normally I would send later in the day after people have already gotten on about their business and whatnot. So I get to do the good businessman on top of the thing sort of scene this morning. And I get to maybe experiment with a little bit of a different lighting condition than I usually do. So that's kind of nice. All right, find ways to work the levers that are available to me in order to find the happiness that's possible within this experience of something that maybe in a perfect world I wouldn't choose. But it's just one of the constraints I live with. Another thing that's really interesting, right now I'm experimenting with sitting down and presenting. That's a bit of a challenge for me. I have this sort of brain that when it's firing and doing its thing, it wants to move the body around a little bit too. So actually standing up and speaking is a lot more natural for me. Sitting in one place and thinking about things and having productive creative thought processes is always a stretch. So sometimes it's nice to test those limits and just recognize that this may be a better setup, right? I'm still experimenting with all the technology and whatnot, and it may be that I can set up a situation where I can sit down and get a video quality that I like. And it may be that I just have to sort of embrace that limitation and just sort of say, okay, well, sometimes it's going to be a little more challenging and I might be a little bit less able to focus because I'm not able to move around quite as much. I'm going to have to scale back my gesticulation. I won't be able to make grand sweeping hand movement gestures, which is very much a part of my communication style, but that's all right. That's a constraint we live with sometimes for the sake of achieving what you'd like to achieve. You have to run up against your own limitations. It's fine. Being dissatisfied again, not trying something because I know that it's going to be a bit more of a challenge. Those sorts of processes don't make my life any better, right? They just heap misery on misery. So spending the time to really inventory what experiences are essential for you and what are things that you can make changes on, make improvements to, is a very important part of the practice of being a happy human being. Having the self-knowledge to know when you've run up against one of the fundamental constraints of your experience. This is just going to be the way that it is. And finding a way then to discern that from all of the optional stuff, the processes that you go into cognitively that are sort of commenting on the fundamental experiences, and just letting those go, just letting those pass through and getting onto something that's more productive, rather than dwelling in, oh, I wish this wasn't so, which no amount of wishing is ever going to change the brute facts of your being, so just get on with life. I think actually, yeah, I was going to go into a whole other thing about mental health, but I think actually that's a different video. So I'm going to end it right there actually today. Just a little brief check-in with what the technology is doing, and yeah, just a brief comment on one of the aspects of letting go, which is just accepting how you are and having the self-knowledge to know when something's not within your power to change, and just saying, okay, then what's my best play from within this? And often that's just let it alone. You know, don't add an experience of dissatisfaction onto this experience that perhaps you otherwise might not choose. And that sort of skill of sort of accepting, looking for the degrees of freedom that you do have, what levers can you pull, and letting go of the cognition that just adds unfortunate experiences to something that you otherwise might not choose, is an important part of the practice of being happy. Give it a go.